everyone, it's Shar. Welcome back to my channel. In case you're wondering, yes, I am absolutely sweating in this sweatshirt because it's 90 degrees outside and it's a heat wave even though it's September. But we are officially over 1 week into the month of September, and I decided that it is time to do my August wrap up, and then I'll have some channel updates and discussions at the end. If you're new to my wrap ups, I usually only do statistics and then highlights and lowlights of the month, but because August was a super busy month for me for various reasons, including a new job and a wedding, I only read 7 books this month. I say only, 7 books is a great thing, but because that number is at 7, I figured you and I could have a more in-depth conversation about what books I read, what ratings I gave them, and how I felt about it. Now, I am a stats nerd when it comes to reading. I think that it is so interesting. So I'm gonna give you my stats and then we'll go one by one in order of the books that I read for my reviews for each of them. So as I mentioned, in August, I read 7 books for a total of 2,190 pages, averaging about to a book length of 313 pages, which makes sense to how I was reading. I ended up giving books an average rating of 3.28 because I gave 1 book 5 star, I gave 1 book 4 stars, I gave 3 books 3.5 stars, I gave 1 book 2 stars, and this is the first month of the year, I think, where I also had a 1-star read, and we are going to talk about it. So the very first book that I read this month in August, which thankfully was a win, was Yours Truly by Abbey Jimenez. This is the sequel to Part of Your World, which if you are new here, I absolutely loved and read earlier this summer. I gave this book 5 stars. In this book, you're following Dr. Brianna and Dr. Jacob. Their last names don't fucking remember. But Bree is going through a hard time. Her brother has failing a kidney and she's really struggling with taking care of him. He's falling into a depression. She also, I believe, is recently divorced from her cheating husband. And she's just having a hard time in life. She's up for a promotion, which she really wants and feels is gonna help her just find some order and structure in her life until a new doctor comes to the hospital, Dr. Jacob. I think it's Maddox, who is super shy and awkward and nerdy and has the unfortunate luck of having 7 people die on his watch on the first day, earning him the nickname of Dr. Death. The nurses don't like him, and Brianna hears the incorrect news that he is running for the same position as she is in, and she thinks that's simply unfair because he's brand new and she's been there 4 years. Jacob knows that Brianna does not like him, and they start writing letters to each other. He starts to explain that he has social anxiety. He's apologizing. They get to know each other. Jacob needs a fake girlfriend because his ex-girlfriend is marrying his brother, and his whole family thinks that he's hung up on it, just like Abbey Jimenez's other book, A Part of Your World. I know she's written more. This book was so emotionally impactful, so beautiful. Man written by a woman. Their relationship was absolutely fantastic, and ultimately I found myself rooting for them. They felt like fully developed 3-dimensional beings and characters with their own problem and issue, but the way that they came together and resolved those issues was really enjoyable. The one thing I did not like was the 3rd act conflict, not because I didn't think it made sense, but because I felt like it was very, very heavy-handed, and there should have been more nuance within the conversation of Brianna's feelings towards Jacob and her feelings towards what ultimately happened at the end of this book. In a completely different vein, next book that I read was Morning Glory Milking Farm, because I was doing a sequel readathon, and if you're not new here, you know that I read and loved Sweet Berries by C.M. Nakasa, but I had not read Morning Glory Milking Farm. If this cover does not tip you off, Morning Glory Milking Farm is set in the same world as Sweet Berries. We're in this fictional town where monsters exist, they mingle with society. We all know these mythical creatures are real. Minotaur spunk has some healing properties, something that's very useful in the creation of some Viagra-like pill for men, and thus they have milking farms. You might be saying to yourself, but bulls don't produce milk. That's not what they're milking, babes. It's not what they're milking. And this book is as unhinged as it fucking sounded, because my main girl jerks off Minotaurs all day for work. But damn, does it pay well. And she's getting herself on her feet, but she finds herself incredibly attracted to this one Minotaur named... who the fuck knows? Because his name's not in the description. She finds herself deeply attracted to him, and every time that she has to jerk him off, she gets super turned on. And that doesn't happen with any of her other clients, who in general, she has no feelings towards. But this one Minotaur, they connect. They obviously have a lot of sexual chemistry. Their banter becomes flirty. They start hanging out outside of the milking farm. And of course, it's a romance. So they have lots of sex and fall in love. That's it. I enjoyed this. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was fun, and while the relationship between Violet and our Minotaur character was very sweet, I felt like it was what was necessary for her at that time and not something that would last long term. I didn't believe the connection that much, and while it was super steamy and the sex scenes in here were very well done, it definitely is truly a monster romance, and he's a bull. He's a bull. That's all I have to say. Ultimately, I found this to be very, very steamy, but ultimately forgettable, which is why it was a 3.5 stars. The very next book that I read for this same reading sequels readathon is Brackenbeast, which is the second book in the 13 series, Kate Alice Marshall's middle grade series. In this book, you are following Eleanor, Pip, and Otto in this little mythical town where they have survived. Ooh, I can't tell you what they've survived because it'd be a spoiler. Just know it's a continuation and figuring out why exactly the people in this town are trying to sacrifice 13-year-olds and how they go about trying to save themselves. While this was definitely very well done, and I highly recommend the audiobook series for this middle grade series, it was also forgettable. Were these books forgettable, or was I just really fucking busy? We'll never know. I can't really tell you what happened here. I thought it was fine. It was a fun middle grade for what it was, and those are my only feelings about it. Stick with me here, because we're still doing the sequel readathon, right? I read Sweat and Soap Volume 9, which is a romance manga by Kinetsu Yamada. In this series, we're following Kotaro and Asako, who are coworkers who fell in love. Is the first volume really fucking weird because he is attracted to her by the scent of her sweat. She's also a hypohidrosis girly, and he finds that deeply erotic. Sure is, but I promise you it gets sweet later in the series. I don't exactly remember this one. It's definitely a progression of their relationship, but more of an exploration of our female main character and her history with being bullied. She ends up going back to her small town, and it's something that she needs to explore and how it impacts their relationship. While it was super cute for what it was, I gave it about 4 stars. It could be 3.5, but honestly, I just love this series so much, so I gave it a 4 star. It's definitely important to the relationship and is part of the progression, but it felt like a filler chapter within the story of their love, or a building block chapter, because I know that these issues are gonna come up later in the series. Y'all are gonna hate me for this one. You really are, because I read Reckless by Elsie Silver, which is apparently everyone's favorite in this series, but I gave it 2 stars and I fucking hated it. I blame this book and one other book later in this list for why I wasn't enjoying reading so much this month. But Reckless by Elsie Silvers is part of the Chestnut Spring series, which, if you're not familiar, is small town cowboy romances. Typically not something that works for me, but I liked Heartless well enough. Now, I went into Reckless with decent expectations. I know everyone loved it, and while I was wary of the premise, which is a strange sister comes to town, has notorious reputation for being a cold-hearted bitch, runs into man at gas station, has drunken one-night stand with man at gas station, gets pregnant, and he finds out after baby is born. That does not sound like my thing. But you know what? Neither does cowboy romance. And I happen to like Heartless. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna put my reservations aside. And boy, was that a big fucking mistake, because this was awful. I hated Theo. I didn't mind Winter, but she felt very one-dimensional, and my God, if this man called her a hissing cat one more fucking time, I was going to scream. I'm not going to tear this book apart. I think if you like the premise, you're gonna like this book. It just wasn't for me. If you think that this premise sounds shitty, but you're gonna like it anyway because everyone else really liked it, you might end up with me in this camp of, I should have fucking listened to my intuition on this one. And to bring some false sense of accomplishment into my life, I read one more sequel, and this sequel was Mantras and Minotaurs. If you haven't seen my I read for 24 hours straight, where I actually read for 24 hours straight, I ended up reading Tentacles and Triathlons in this book, so I read Mantras and Minotaurs, the newest release in this series, and I was pleasantly surprised. In this book, we are following, once again, we're in this mythical town where mythical creatures have come out to humanity, and we're all like, cool, we'll live in peace, right? We're following the mother of the characters in the first book and the second book. Pleasantly surprised, because it's not often that I pick up a romance with middle-aged characters, and this one happened to be a romance between two people in their 50s and 60s who are close to or already retired. I love that aspect of it. So our main female character is Pam. Both of her kids are in serious relationships. Her daughter's getting married. Her husband died a long time ago. It was a shitty marriage. And she's feeling like she wants to get back onto the market, but doesn't really want anything serious. So she joins the monster equivalent of Tinder, swipes right on this Minotaur named Alistair, who is a billionaire in the weed industry and happens to own a ski chalet. I don't fucking know, some kind of cabin in the mountains. It's billionaire monster romance. That's what this is. Alistair thinks that Pam is a real fucking babe, just absolutely gorgeous, cannot believe his luck, and this is about them exploring their relationship. Initially, they don't want a relationship. They both think that they're kind of past their prime, just want to have some good times, some hookups, but they fall in love, and it's all about Pam's exploration of retirement and what it means to find herself after spending the majority of her life in a very toxic marriage and focusing on the needs of other people, and for Alistair to release control of his business and focus more on his family and his wants. It is very steamy, and while it was super cute, it was a pretty standard romance. I would hesitate to call it generic, but I also wouldn't say that it was a standout by any means. It's a popcorn book, something that you read if you want to have a good time, but not something that you're expecting to blow your mind, which is why it was 3.5 stars. And we end the month on a terrible low note, because I joined a book club, which was a high note. Yay for me for joining a book club. And the first book that we ended up reading was a dark romance. We read Penpal by JT Gessinger. Now, this is the story of a woman who has recently been widowed, and I'm talking like a couple of weeks ago, been widowed, and she comes home and she finds a letter addressed to her from a prison from a man called Dante. It's super fucking cryptic, but she keeps getting letters from Dante, and Dante eventually shows up. Doesn't that sound like something I would enjoy? And you know what? I really would have fucking enjoyed it if it was actually about that, which it wasn't. Who the fuck is Dante? He shows up all of 3 times and is completely irrelevant to the story. Completely. You would think that's what the story is about because that's what the summary says, but it's not. Instead, it's really weird, and it's about our main character and this annoying fuck named Aiden. Yeah, you can tell how I feel about it. I would have liked Aiden because of what happens at the end, but honestly, I found him annoying. And the entire time I read this, I felt like I was reading 2 different stories. One part erotica, one part haunted house, and they felt like completely separate chapters. Now, if you love this story, good for you. It is very highly rated on Goodreads. I'm happy that it worked for you. For me, it was a flaming pile of absolutely not, and I gave it 1 0.5 stars. 0.5 stars because I was mildly intrigued by the haunted house ghost story elements of it. If the story was truly what the premise said it was, I would have enjoyed it, but it wasn't, and so I didn't. And that's it. Those are the 7 books that I read this month. Let me know what you read in August. I would be excited to know what your favorite book of the month was. As always, thank you so much for watching. And for the channel updates, I've mentioned at the beginning of this video, I did get a new job, and I'm being very mindful about not burning out. I won't get too deep into this conversation in this video, but I burned out really severely last year, and it took 10 months of recovery and therapy to get to the point where I felt at least somewhat stable. So because I did start a new job and it is a full-time job and I have my other channel, I'm only gonna be posting on here once a week. That is my aim. There could of course be slower weeks where I have more time, in which case I will post more than one video, but for now, you can expect a new video every single Sunday. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you to every single one of you who take the time to watch my videos and to leave comments. I love you all so much, and I'm gonna see you next time. Bye.